Hi folks, HR Funk here. Holding in my hand one round of 9mm parabellum ammunition. Specifically, this is a Winchester 115 grain Silvertip hollow point, and in a recent community post, I identified this as being the most vilified cartridge in U.S. history. Based on the response to that post, some of you got the reference because back in 1986, the FBI identified a single 115 grain Winchester Silvertip as having failed to stop the principal bad guy in the infamous Miami-Dade shootout, and subsequent to that, several FBI agents were severely injured and killed. My purpose in this video is not to rehash that incident, but if you're interested in knowing what happened, Paul Harrell produced a very good video on that incident several years ago that I believe is still up on YouTube, so you can go back and take a look at that. What I want to do today is take a look at the actual performance of the Winchester Silvertip hollow point and see if it's as bad as we were led to believe. Now, I tend to think it wasn't, because that very cartridge, that very bullet that the FBI said didn't stop the bad guy, inflicted what was later described as an unsurvivable or non-survivable wound. So the bad guy who took that round was still mobile, but he was in the process of bleeding to death while he was still shooting at the FBI agents. Now, interestingly, my understanding of the Silvertip hollow points is that they were designed in the late 70s, early 80s, when there was a concern that bullets fired particularly by police officers might overpenetrate the bad guy they were shooting and go on to injure an innocent person that was somewhere behind that bad guy. So the Silvertip hollow point was made to expand quickly and stay inside of a human torso, which is exactly what it did in that incident with the FBI. And as I said, it inflicted a pretty severe wound. So how bad is this stuff? Cartridges in the Winchester Silvertip line are what I call legacy ammunition, meaning ammunition that we all used back in the day to defend ourselves, to protect our families, and to keep our communities safe. And reputedly, the Winchester Silvertip bullet has been redesigned over the years, and the ammunition today is not quite exactly the same as it was back during the 1980s. But whenever I see that stated, I never see any specification as to exactly what was changed. At best, we get some vague reference to a difference in the thickness of the jacket material and possibly a change in the geometry of the hollow cavity. But as to how that impacts the bullet's performance and what's different now as compared to how it worked back during the 1980s, I never see anything stated. So I'm going to be testing this ammunition. It is recently manufactured. I just bought this box of ammunition a couple of weeks ago. It is still identified as Winchester Silvertip ammunition, so it's not too different because Winchester kept the same name, and they've developed other defensive ammunition since that time that has been given different names, and the bullets have different designs. In any case, this is going to be one type of legacy ammunition that I'm testing today. The other one also is still available, albeit I think on a limited basis. And this is a legacy cartridge that a lot of us carried back in the day. This is the 115 grain Federal BPLE, which is a 115 grain plus P plus 9mm loading. I actually carried both of these at one time or another during my law enforcement career. The Silvertip hollow point I carried way back at the very beginning, and not too long after that we switched over and I started carrying the 115 grain BPLE, and I felt a lot more confident in this bullet than I did in this one. And one of the things I want to look at today is if that confidence was well founded or if there really wasn't much difference between how these two perform. Now, there's no way to really gauge that without testing it against some more modern ammunition. So I've got three modern loads with me as well. One of them is the 124 grain Speer Gold Dot. I would say this is pretty much an industry standard throughout law enforcement. A lot of departments use this load. Also, I've got a relative newcomer. This is 124 grain Sig V-Crown ammunition. I've been kind of itching to test this stuff. I have a pretty good opinion of it, and I want to see how it performs when I put it through some penetration testing. The last one is from a local manufacturer. This is a 124 grain jacketed hollow point from House of Pain. Some of you are familiar with them. They're a channel sponsor. Go to House of Pain online. You can look at their ammunition selections, see if they have anything that's going to work for you. Also, don't forget my discount code there. Anyway, I wanted to test this as well. So I'm going to be testing all 5 of these cartridges, and I'm going to be putting them through Dick Fairbairn's testing protocol that I used recently in another video for 38 special ammunition. And just like that time around, I'm going to put a link in the description section of this video to Dick's video where he explains how he developed that protocol. He can explain it much better than I do, but what I'll say here briefly is that using this test protocol allows you to use water as opposed to ballistic gel, but the computations that I use give a very close approximation to how these bullets would perform if I was firing them into calibrated 10% ballistic gel. So again, check the link in the description section of this video. You can check out Dick's video and he can explain exactly how that system works. I'm just going to be doing the computations here and then telling you what the approximate performance would be in that calibrated ballistic gel. Also, to maintain some suspense, I'm going to start out with the modern ammunition and I'm going to save the 2 legacy cartridges for last. So we'll go off to the range. I'll shoot one of the modern rounds. In fact, I'm going to start out with the 124 grain Speer Gold Dot round. Then we'll come back. I'll show you the computations and what its performance would be if we were shooting it into ballistic gel. Then we'll go back out and try another one. But the last 2 up are going to be my 2 legacy cartridges. So here we go. Since I'm testing legacy ammunition, I decided it would be appropriate to test them with a legacy handgun that would have been similar to the ones we would have carried when those cartridges were the norm back in the day. So all of the testing in this video was performed with my Smith & Wesson 39-2. This is a 1979 vintage handgun. It has a 4-inch barrel. I did conduct velocity testing off camera with this pistol. I will show you the velocity results. I was going to show you the chronograph testing in the video, but I decided that was just going to add length and I can just tell you what the average velocity was. I fired 3 rounds of each of the cartridges that I'm testing over the chronograph out of this handgun, and I'll show you those velocity results as we go. First up is the Speer 124 grain Gold Dot hollow point. Let's see what happens. And that Speer load made it through 1, 2, 3. It is in the 3rd jug. It bulged this side of the 3rd jug. Let's find the bullet. And there it is. Here is an up-close look at that 124 grain Gold Dot hollow point. The expansion looks very good. I will weigh it when I get back to the shop and find out what the retained weight is. But overall, not bad performance from our modern ammunition. And here we go with the results for the Speer 124 grain Gold Dot hollow point. This ammunition had an average velocity of 1,148 feet per second out of the 4-inch barrel of my Smith & Wesson Model 39. In the water test, I fired that bullet and it was recovered from jug number 3, meaning it totally penetrated 2 jugs for 12 inches, but it gets an additional 6-inch credit for marking the back of jug number 3. When we plug in the conversion factor, that comes out to an approximate penetration depth of 11.61 inches in calibrated ballistic gel. The recovered diameter of the bullet measures 0.591 inches, so essentially it expanded to 60 caliber. And the recovered weight was 123.4 grains, so basically 100% weight retention. I would say this is probably the exact performance this bullet was designed to attain, and it absolutely did that. Now let's head back out to the range and we'll check out the performance of the 124 grain Sig V-Crown. On we go to the Sig 124 grain V-Crown. And I didn't say it before, but the reason I'm kneeling down is so I can shoot straight into these jugs. That way the bullet should hopefully not go out the top or out the bottom as it's traveling through. So let's see how the Sig load does. And that 124 grain V-Crown bullet went through 1, 2, 3, 4, and cracked the back of the 4th jug. So better penetration with that Sig load than we saw with the Gold Dot. Let's take a look at the bullet. So folks, this is a little bit of a mystery. This is the fourth jug, and you can see an entrance hole there, and there is where it cracked the back of this jug. The next jug, the fifth jug, does have a mark. It marked the back of the fifth jug, but it did not penetrate the fifth jug. But I cannot find that bullet. The only thing I can assume is the bullet made it out of the fourth jug, hit the fifth jug, and then rebounded off to the side somewhere and fell down into the grass, and it's just gone. So unfortunately, I'm not going to have that one to review further, and I wish I did because it looks like it was pretty good performance. So folks, what I'm going to do, since I could not recover that 124 grain V-Crown, is I'm going to test the remaining ammunition I have, and if I still have enough water jugs, I'll try another round of the 124 grain Sig V-Crown. So it would appear that I do have just enough jugs left to test one more round of that Sig 124 grain V-Crown ammunition. Now you remember the first time the bullet went through 4 jugs and apparently rebounded off the back of jug number 5, and I was not able to find it. It did mark the back of jug number 5. I think I've got 6 jugs left, so hopefully we'll be able to recover this bullet and I can take a look at its retained weight and also its expansion. And what I'll do in terms of penetration is look at what we get this time around, and I'll compare that to what we got the first time around, and I'll average the results for the final performance of this load. So let's see how this one does. And on this second try, with the 124 grain Sig V-Crown, it went through 1 jug, 2 jugs, 3 jugs, and broke the 4th jug. Hopefully we have a bullet here to recover. Yes, we do. Wow, nice expansion with that Sig V-Crown, if I can get the camera to focus. So that's an impressive load. This one didn't penetrate quite as far as the first one did, but still that was good penetration, good expansion, and I'll find out what the retained weight is when I get it back to the shop. So fortunately, I had enough water jugs out there to be able to conduct a second test with this ammunition, and I was able to recover the bullet this time around, and I'm glad I did because I think that bullet performance is pretty impressive actually. This ammunition had an average velocity of 1,152 feet per second when I tested it over the chronograph. In the first test in the water, since I couldn't recover the bullet, I had to go with just what I could see, and the bullet completely penetrated 4 jugs since it left the 4th jug and couldn't be recovered, so that's 24 inches of penetration, plus an additional 7.5 inches for marking the next jug. When we plug in the conversion factor, that comes out to possibly a 20.3 inch penetration depth in calibrated ballistic gel, but since I couldn't recover the bullet, it gets kind of hard to say. So I'm not feeling real good about that. I feel much better about this second test. This time around, the bullet was recovered in jug number 3, so it completely penetrated 2 jugs for 12 inches. It got an additional 8-inch credit for breaking the next jug. So that gives it an overall penetration in water of 20 inches. We plug in the conversion factor, and that gives it almost 13 inches of penetration in calibrated ballistic gel. So not bad at all. I thought this was very good performance. I said early on in the video I was looking forward to testing this. I've been wanting to for a while, and I was pleasantly surprised with how well it did. The recovered diameter was 0.573 inches, and recovered weight was still 100%, 124.3 grains. So if I average the performance from these 2 different tests, it comes out to an average of 16.6 inches of approximate penetration in calibrated ballistic gel, but I'm feeling much better about the results this time around than I did with that first test. So take this all with a grain of salt. I think this is probably closer to what we would see, the 13 inches of penetration, which is still very good if we were firing this into actual ballistic gel. Now, let's head back out to the range, and we'll see how the House of Pain ammunition stacks up against these other cartridges. Next up is the 124 grain House of Pain jacketed hollow point. Let's see how it does. And the 124 grain House of Pain made it through 1, 2, 3. It's in jug number 4, and I don't really see a mark on jug number 5. It did dent the back of jug number 4. Not bad with that 124 grain House of Pain load. The expansion is not tremendous, but it is definitely there. The penetration was good. Once again, I will weigh this when I get back to the shop, find out what the retained weight is, and we'll see how it ranks in comparison to all these other bullets that I'm testing today. So here is that House of Pain bullet. For the average of 3 rounds fired over my chronograph out of the Smith & Wesson Model 39, this ammunition averaged 1,130 feet per second. When I fired it into the water, it was recovered in jug number 4, meaning it completely penetrated 3 jugs for a total of 18 inches, but it received an additional 6-inch credit for marking the back of jug number 4, and when we plug in the conversion factor, that gives an approximate penetration depth in calibrated ballistic gel of 15.5 inches. So nice penetration with this load. Not surprisingly, the expansion was a little bit less because the more a bullet expands, the more it slows down, and that prevents it from penetrating as deeply as it otherwise might. But still, not bad at all. 54 caliber, and the recovered weight was 122 grains, which again is very good. So nice performance, a nice deep penetrating round with this House of Pain ammo. Now let's head back out and we'll see what happened with the Federal 115 grain plus P plus BPLE. So now we're up to the first of my legacy 9mm loads today. This is the 115 grain Federal BPLE plus P plus. I had a pretty high opinion of this load when I carried it back during the 1990s. Let's see if it lives up to my expectations. Well, if the splashback was anything to go by, that was more water coming back at me that time than I've gotten with any of the other bullets that I tested. Probably has something to do with the velocity. Let's see what it did to the jugs. So the BPLE made it through 1, I think it made it through 2. There's either a really big dent in jug number 3 or the bullet actually is in there. Let's see. I see a piece of it in jug number 2. So I've got some jacket material in jug number 2. Let's see if we can find the bullet's core in jug number 3. And I've got quite a few more fragments too. I'm going to try to catch them as well. So I've got a handful of bullet fragments. And I'll try to show you what I have here if I can keep from dropping it. There are those fragments. I'll try to keep them all together and weigh them when I get back to the shop, but you can see that bullet essentially destroyed itself as it was traveling through those jugs. This was quite an interesting test with the BPLE. This ammunition averaged 1,286 feet per second, fired out of the 4-inch barrel of my Smith & Wesson Model 39, which was by far the highest velocity of any ammunition that I tested on this particular occasion. When fired into the water, I recovered it from jug number 3, meaning it completely penetrated 2 jugs for 12 inches, but it got an additional 6-inch credit for marking the back of jug number 3, giving it an overall penetration in water of 18 inches. When we plug in the conversion factor, that gives it a penetration depth in calibrated ballistic gel of 11.61 inches, so not bad. The bullet tore itself to pieces while attaining that penetration depth. So every one of these fragments would have been a secondary wound channel, causing greater hemorrhage. So you might look at the penetration depth and say, well, that didn't make it to 12 inches, or at least approximated, would not make it to 12 inches in 10% ballistic gel. But here again, it went over 11.5 inches and created what would probably be a pretty nasty wound. The recovered diameter of the core was 0.561 inches, and that was this piece right here. This was also the heaviest single piece that I was able to recover. It weighs a little over 53 grains. All the fragments together are pretty much all of the bullet, because all of these fragments come up to just under the original weight of 115 grains. I had read somewhere years ago that these bullets essentially self-destruct while they are creating a wound channel, and that is absolutely what this one did. And again, I would not want to be shot with that. I think that's going to be a pretty nasty wound, and there's going to be a lot of things that some doctor is going to have to pick out of that wound if they are in the process of trying to patch somebody up. Now, let's head back out to the range for the final test. This is going to be the 115 grain Winchester Silvertip. Last up, we have the much maligned 115 grain Winchester Silvertip. Let's see how it does. So the 115 grain Silvertip went through one jug, and it dented the back of jug number 2, but did not make it all the way out. So I think that's the lowest level of penetration we've seen so far with any of these loads. And I think it's easy to see why that penetration was so limited. That is tremendous expansion from that Silvertip hollow point. I'll be interested to see how much retained weight it has. Here once again is that recovered 115 grain Winchester Silvertip hollow point. And again, we see that tremendous expansion with this bullet. And one of the things I noticed while conducting the velocity test with this ammunition was the average velocity for the Silvertip ammo out of my 4-inch Model 39 was 1,200 feet per second. This was the second highest average velocity registered by any of the loads that I was testing on this particular occasion, second only to the BPLE plus P plus load. So I'm certain that velocity contributed to this expansion, as did most likely a very soft lead compound for the core of the bullet and probably a very thin and pliable metal jacket. This bullet was recovered in jug number 2, so it had 6 inches of penetration. It got an additional 6-inch credit for marking the back of jug number 2, so that gave it 12 inches. When we plug in the conversion factor, that would be approximately 7 3/4 inches in calibrated ballistic gel. The expansion was 70 caliber with this bullet, so by far the greatest level of expansion we saw out of any of the bullets on this particular occasion. Retained weight was 111 grains, so it didn't lose very much even though it expanded like that. So once again, I think this bullet performed exactly the way it was designed to perform. If you're worried about overpenetration and you want to make sure your bullet does the maximum amount of damage while reducing that possibility that's going to pass completely through an individual and cause danger downrange somewhere, then this bullet did exactly that. It would have stayed inside of a human torso in all likelihood. Now, we don't know exactly what someone's physical makeup might be or anything else, and obviously if it's going through a hand or an arm or something, it might penetrate all the way through. But with a good chest cavity hit, that's probably going to stay inside of that person, and you're not going to have to worry about that overpenetration danger. The good news is that each one of these loads performed consistently with their design parameters. So in that respect, the ammunition manufacturers produced cartridges that did exactly what they said they were going to do, and I would not want to be shot with any of them. So after all this testing, which one of these is the best 9mm load for defensive purposes? The answer is there's no way to tell. The reason I say that is because you have no way of knowing who your attacker might be at some point in the future or what your circumstances might be. If you're attacked by a 115-pound meth head and you're in a densely populated area or an apartment complex or a hotel or something like that, then overpenetration could be a concern, and in that circumstance, possibly the Silvertip hollow point or the BPLE would be your best option, because Once again, in all likelihood, with a good chest cavity hit, that bullet should stay inside that person and produce a substantial wound. However, if you're attacked by a 300-pound hulking giant and you need the most penetration you can possibly get, then probably the House of Pain or the V-Crown from Sig would be your best option. If you're looking for a good middle-of-the-road cartridge that's going to not penetrate too deeply, that's going to expand pretty well, then maybe for a one-size-fits-all application, the Speer Gold Dot might be the best one to go with. So my purpose with this video is just to provide you the results of these tests. You can evaluate them for yourselves. You can consider your own situation, your own circumstances, and decide which one of these might be the best for your use. And that's the video for today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments about this video, as always, make sure you forward those to me. Remember, stop by hrfunk.com, take a look at all the news and information there. Also, check out the product page for all of the links to products you've seen reviewed here on the channel, as well as discount codes for those products. See you next time, folks. And until then, hopefully with a classic handgun and legacy ammunition, good shooting. Bye-bye.